Welcome to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And I'm Cheta Wanze.
A rather jubilant Cheta, I must add.
No, nothing to be jubilant about. It's I hasten to say that I'm a bit down.
Mm.
Because a few minutes ago, so we're recording this on Monday evening.
Mm.
I begged Madam Producer that we should shift to tomorrow so that we'll have a fairer idea of what is happening, because within the last hour, some people have launched a coup against Keir Starmer, and it is entirely possible that he would succeed, that they would succeed. For me, it's 50-50 at this point, in my view. I am frightened of what comes next if they succeed. Because as we are going to talk about in this episode, reform are not ready and will never be ready to govern. But it needs time for that to be very obvious to people. If reform gets into power, then it will be very difficult to remove them, because that's how it is with right-wing populists. Getting into power is the easy part. Removing them is always the tough part.
I mean, we saw it with Viktor Orban in Hungary. He was only removed because someone that used to be in his camp had decided that he had had enough. So using his own tactics, as it were, against him. So what you said, Cheta, is very pertinent. Removing, these guys is hard.
Yeah, but it's not just that. With respect to Peter Magyar and Viktor Orban,
Mm.
the thing is, Orban had just stayed too long. He was there 16 years. So 16 years time, I'll be in my 60s.
And as we're talking, I'm following it's so an account on Twitter, GB Politics, has launched a live tracker. It's how bad it is. And as at now, 69 Labour MPs have called on Keir Starmer to resign as Prime Minister. So when it's bad, when there's a live tracker that people are following to find out what's happening. And it's and it goes to what you said earlier, Cheta. We knew, we had said it at different times, that the thing about Keir Starmer and these May elections was not so much a question of if, but when. Because
Not
the way,
but how bad?
no, it's not even about the shellacking, which definitely was bad, but the call for his Keir Starmer's resignation, it was always going to come, because again, if you follow UK politics for even a little while, UK politics does not seem to forgive leaders who do not win. And it's one of the things I've never really understood, because in an election, there will be winners, there will be losers. It's the nature of the game. So it's almost like saying, for every time, and again, maybe or rather, we see countries do this a lot, Cheta, and you will know this in football. You don't win, suddenly you sack the national coach. But the thing is, UK politics is notorious for always removing leaders. But you had said something initially, that you would have loved it for MPs to hold their nerves until we see the down. I won't say downfall, but reform showed its incompetence, and we're already seeing it. As of today, about 5 or 6 reform councillors have already resigned after wasting taxpayer money to conduct an election. For various reasons, they've either been sacked or have resigned. So they hadn't even lasted a week before the sham started falling apart. However, for some weird reason, the MPs, everybody and their dog knew that Labour was going to have a bad local election. But somehow, the knee-jerk reaction was, in my opinion, to say, right, these guys should go now. And it's going to lead us in a situation where, and I hope you're wrong, Cheta, with your prediction, where a general election is called early. And if a general election is called early, we know that people, because they are tired, sadly, of the two-party system, they're tired of Labour, they're tired of the Conservatives, sadly, we are going to see a situation where you have reform, if not forming the government outrightly, be the largest party in government, and that is scary.
Yeah, so I think that's the so let's take a recap of what I've been saying for months now. Reform's popularity has peaked. The and you can even see it. The percentage of votes that they've been winning has actually been dropping, even in these last elections. Yes, they were the big winners in these last elections, but by proportion, it has been dropping. However, they are still in that zone where, in political science, what we call lagging effects, which is basically it has happened, but it takes some time before it becomes obvious to everybody. And
Mm.
like I've said multiple times on this podcast, what needs to happen is for reform to win big at the council polls, which has happened, for Labour to hold its nerve, which seems not to be happening, so that reform will be seen for the charlatans that they are. Because it is that at the end of the day, my argument has remained very simple. Um, our own survey, arguably, I mean, you can make the argument that our survey was of African heritage people, but nevertheless, I'm of the opinion that that is the real issue affecting most Brits. Our
Mm.
own survey showed that what's really, what people are really concerned about is not immigration, as Reform tries to say. And notice Nigel Farage, because it's important to point out that Keir Starmer went right wing on immigration. The Starmer
Mm.
government went right wing on immigration. And they have brought immigration numbers down to the lowest that they have been for a very long time. So because of that, Nigel Farage no longer talks about immigration.
Mm.
He's going more right wing in terms of the kind of things that he talks about. But the real thing that bothers people, he can't talk about it, which is cost of living. Keir Starmer's speech today, I don't know if you watched it, but or if you listened to it. Keir Starmer's speech today, and this is one of this is so the problem with the speech was that Keir Starmer still behaved like a coward.
Mm. Mm.
You are essentially you are telling people, if anybody who reads between the lines, you are telling people that Brexit has failed, but you can't come out and state it clearly.
Mm.
I mean, so it's that kind of if he had it's so yes, the argument can be made that the speech was too little, too late, but if he had been bolder, some of the people who are now rallying around against him may have thought twice because he has still shown that timidity, like this, and then what was that nonsense of comparing Zach Polanski with Nigel Farage? I mean, see, the what people saw in all of that was it doesn't matter how much you demonize immigrants, it doesn't matter how much you bring immigration down, the Farage voters will never come to you. So what you need to do is the people who Labour lost, because again, if you look at the numbers that have come out, the same dynamic that our own poll predicted, our own survey predicted,
Mm.
is actually what's played out. Labour did not lose voters to reform.
They did not. No.
Labour lost voters to the Greens. So essentially, what the people who are rebelling against Keir Starmer now are saying is, hang on, we are losing voters to the Greens, and instead of Keir Starmer to try to placate those voters and bring them back into the Labour fold, he's going ahead to compare Zach Polanski with Nigel Farage, which means that you will even push these people even further away. Which means that the wipeout that affected over 1,000 Labour councillors will affect us in the next election. So that is what people are hedging against.
Yeah.
The
And we're
problem is the
mm.
problem is that the media in the UK is dominated by right-wing voices. So the way the conservatives, and there's a lesson to be learned here. Politics of fear doesn't move the needle. The Labour flyers that came in through my post box all kept hammering on the same thing. That a vote for Greens is a vote for reform. Is- don't give me that crap. Focus on what you want to do.
Mm. And that's what has always been, sadly, the right of the parties um, approach. We will piss everyone off, and then we will tell you, look, we know you're pissed off. However, it could be worse with those other guys, and that is almost is providing you with an option that is really not an option, and that might have worked previously, but this time around, people said, "Sod it." If that's how you want to play, don't worry. We can also cut our nose to spite our faces. And the other thing, I've been saying it personally, but then when I spoke to a few candidates, some of whom sadly lost their seats, one of the biggest things they kept saying to me is, we don't understand why there's this attack against the Greens. Because when you look at it, a lot of the people who have gone over to the Greens, as we saw in our poll, and people, and thanks a lot to those who took part in it. But a lot of people who went to the Greens were former Labour voters. So the more you antagonize the Greens, who, as it were rising above the fray by not hitting back at you, but by talking about hope, talking about how things could be, talking, reaching to human emotions, and you make them the underdogs. And if there's anything history has taught us, history loves the underdogs. Forget how, if at the end of the day they turn out to be despots or they turn out to be mad people, that is a bridge that people will cross when they get there. However, at the point when you've made someone the underdog and they see themselves in their situations, they look at the cost of living crisis that is hitting them, and they see this person who also been beaten down by the powers that be, you automatically cause an alignment between them,
With
and
that,
there's no way. There's no way you can win that. And for some weird reason, whoever is running the strategy at HQ does not seem to get this, and it's upsetting because I was sat there, I was looking at.
you sound really upset.
I am upset because not just because I know a few of the people who have lost their seats. These are brilliant, brilliant people, councillors. But I'm also looking at you. I'm like, it. Here's what the problem or it's going to cause. Because on one hand, you're looking at losing seats to the Greens, but on the other hand, and I don't think they're looking at it, there's going to be a deep fracture within the party, because people are going to then look at themselves and say, you are going to get elected or not based on your personal brand. And what you don't want is people promoting their personal brands in the party above the party, because they might as well be independent. And we saw it at the last local elections in, I think that was 2022, when, and even 2023, when the Conservatives started going by local Conservatives. They tried so hard to separate themselves from the National Party. And that is not what you want. But other than that, you have people who are going to say, well, I'm going to go to the Greens. I'm upset because I still do believe that Labour is the party when it is focused, and when the leadership is focused on true Labour values, is the party that works best for our
What
communities,
is
for our
Labour
values.
values?
It's it is compassion, is making sure that the people at the lower class, or the working, it has a voice at the table. That's why the Labour was formed by trade unions, people that wanted to give everyday people a voice and a seat at the table. Now, that, if I was doing an analysis, and it made so much sense, that we don't have that industrial base anymore. So your so-called working man or working woman or working person is now the person who can't afford a job, or who's on low wage, who can't afford a flat if they live in London, who can't even afford to pay their rent. The dynamics has changed. And these are the people that Greens are reaching out to, because they speak to them according to the pains they're feeling in these modern times. So whilst we hear Labour politicians talk about the ideals of the working person, the truth is that a new working person is that person who's working at a coffee shop that can't afford the coffee that they're selling and serving people, but who are also,
Sounds very much like Nigeria.
you understand. But when you are now beating down the party that is telling them there's hope, we can make hope normal again, you suddenly say to them, we are not for you. I don't know how hard it is to understand, but I think we've gone too far without even talking about the local elections. We just went straight into the.
Yeah, but because I mean, so basically, events have moved.
And sorry,
What is,
Chita.
yeah,
And even because we always need to bring it down to our communities. In the context of our communities, the new, in quote, working person is that person who has come, who literally has come here with hope. For a lot of people, sold everything they had, paying into the NHS even before they had a chance to even to register with the GP, have paid, are coming here. Some people were being forced to pay like 6 months rent in advance, and all they wanted was a party that could speak to their aspiration.
I
And
mean, the fair truth is that the Greens are speaking to their aspirations. Um,
and as we were talking, the ticker, has gone up to 76 now. It's mad. All they need now is 4 more MPs to reach the threshold for a leadership challenge.
Madam Producer, you see yourself. I said, let us do this thing tomorrow.
No, but
Anyway,
Abuja is a stickler
I beg, I beg, I beg, I beg, I beg. Sometimes you need to be able to be flexible. Anyway, um, I think we've dwelt enough on his speech. The speech essentially is the speech essentially is what has sunk him, in my view. If he had um if he had just sat with stopped at making calls to affected MPs, affected councillors, and then talking one-on-one with as many MPs as possible, he would have been better served. The speech sounded very out of touch. It was in many respects, to be honest, if you can remove the person making the speech, with the exception of details, especially the failure, and that was the one I zeroed in on, the failure to pointedly say. So the two things that I zeroed in on, the failure to pointedly say that Brexit is a failure, one, and number two, comparing Zach Polanski with Nigel Farage. Those are the things that have stung Starmer. I would be I mean, the one thing that I have learned in 15 years as a geopolitical analyst is never say 100%, but I would give it that Starmer does not see the end of this week somewhere between 80 and 90%.
um, whilst I think.
And here's what I
Mm,
fear.
mm.
I fear that Starmer is petty. I
That
fear that
you think that he might call the general election.
yes, that he might throw the cat among the pigeons and call the general election.
Well, let's hope he doesn't get
But
to that. But Cheta, I
I
also
think
think I think the MPs as well who are doing this. There's a lot. I don't know whether it's because there are a lot of them are new, but there's a lack of political nous because Farage ran on the platform of vote reform, get rid of Starmer, and what you're doing right now is it is you're writing reforms. I I
not
don't
just that.
understand.
Again, so you are right. There's a lot of political naivettes happening. They need to be patient. One. Number two, but then we should not remove the element of greed.
Mm,
I think that deep down, people like West Streeting know that if Andy Bonham finds his way back into parliament, West
mm.
Streeting won't have a chance. So they are trying to move ahead of that.
It's politics after all.
It's politics after all, but sometimes you have to learn to lean back to look at the bigger picture.
Mm,
The bigger picture in this case is the United Kingdom. Again, it's so one thing that Starmer said in his speech, which he was very correct, it is actually existential. You open the door for that Farage fellow to get in, you will remake this country in ways that that people will be so shocked. Anyway, um, my own analysis is there's a bit of revision from me now.
mm.
I don't think, given the way the Conservatives performed, I don't think that if there's a general election today, I think that Reform will be the biggest party. But
Yeah.
I don't think that they will have enough votes to form a government on their own. They will need to enter a coalition. I don't think they'll be able to find the numbers to make a majority because the Tories will be all but wiped out.
Mm,
I don't think Labour will do a deal with them. I don't think that Greens or the Lib Dems will do a deal with them. I don't think that the DUP or any of those other French parties will be big enough for them. And whatever coalition they may manage to form will be extremely unstable.
mm,
So essentially, we are entering a scenario in the UK where it's going to be Dutch kind of politics. Remember, Hesveldas, his party essentially won the elections, but he has never become prime minister
mm,
because they just cannot form a stable coalition.
yeah. And
So
and
I think
and
that's and given this stagnation, bear in mind that PwC published a report today that says something in the order of I think 77% of Brits are genuinely frightened about cost of living.
mm,
That's the big problem. But when you and they're more frightened about cost of living because of the Iran war. And bear
mm,
in mind that yesterday Trump refused the terms that the Iranians offered. One of America's major neocon political scientist, Robert Kagan, published an article in which he admitted that America has lost the Iraq war.
mm,
It's in the geopolitical field. It's actually major news. Robert Kagan admitting that America has lost the war. But the key thing, as somebody pointed out, it's not about whether Robert Kagan is admitting, it's about whether the rest of the American establishment understands that this is where we're at. So, unfortunately, they are going to keep fighting for a while, which means that prices are still going to go up for a bit. As in, things are going to get really bad as it were before they
mm.
get better. And it's not something that I look forward to. Not in the slightest.
Okay. Tell you what, Chita, let's go for a quick break. When we
No
come back,
wahala.
we'll focus on the local elections proper and what
You are
the
keen to
results.
do this catharsis, Sabi.
Well, I can always count on you to be my to be the person I pour this frustration out on, and then you just laugh about it and tell me you were right a while ago about how it's going to turn out.
Well, one thing that I'm glad about is that Toriola Coca lost, and he lost quite woefully.
And that we should talk about after the break.
No wahala.
Welcome back to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And I'm Sheta Wanze.
Tata, let's start this half with one of the politicians who you followed during the last local elections, Toriola Coca, the Nigerian chap who stood on the platform of reform and who
In
has been
short, we
pointed out.
suppose we suppose collect and flog and better koboko.
So it's interesting, Cheta, because Toriola, the lady from Zimbabwe, I don't remember, the two black, or should I say, even African heritage candidates,
Reform candidates.
reform candidates who stood and who caused a lot of uproar, not just amongst reform voters, but even in our community, managed to lose, even in a reform wave, managed to not get enough votes. So does that say does that tell us the one thing that everyone, plus I suspect that everyone and their dog knows about reform, that reform keeps denying, and that for some weird reason these two candidates chose to ignore that the reform is no friend to our community?
Of course. I mean, I don't understand what kind of self-sabotage will make somebody Omo Nigeria pata go into a party that has a Glenn Gibbons that said melt all the Nigerians down and fill the potholes with them. How do you do that? So it was it's great news that he lost. Um, and I hope he has learned his lessons. Somehow I don't believe that he has. Um, but the quality of candidates that reform, and this goes to that thing that I have been saying for a while, that reform is nowhere near ready to govern, nowhere near interested in governing. You had there's a reform candidate in Wales, Kim, who was not even present at the declaration because
And
the guy
and
picked form.
the picture they used did him no
Yeah,
because
he
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 looked
he
surprised
picked.
as hell.
No, no. One thing that I can tell you is, you know, cameras. Nowadays,
Yeah.
you have all these repeat. In short, they've been there for a long time. You have repeating cameras that take you in so many poses. Proper newspaper houses,
Mm.
not at the risk of dumping on my Nigerian colleagues, not the type that you have in Nigeria. Proper newspaper houses have proper photo editors that will look at up to 100 pictures and then pick one.
Just to find that one.
And and they pick the one that tells a story that they want to tell.
Yeah.
So basically, the picture that they picked of that Kim fellow was one of him looking very bewildered. I see
Like,
him. The
how the
guy,
hell did
the
I
guy.
win?
I see. I said the guy probably picked the form as a joke, something
Hmm.
to just make him popular in the community. That's okay, people know him. And then
Hmm.
that day he cast his vote and then went to work. And maybe a per hour working they do. So he go do the work. He must collect the coins. And then suddenly the content and say, guy, you need to show that declaration. You are the councillor now. The guy was looking. But jokes aside, it shows just how unprepared,
Mm.
unready for anything close to governorship, to governance that
Mm.
reform is. They have a motley collection of racists. So people like we talked about Glenn Gibbons because that's the one that concerns me. He said that I should be melted down, and Nigerians need to learn to take these things personally. He
Hmm.
said I should be melted down to
I
feel
used to
pothole.
feel pothole. And you
I
see,
said I
Cheta,
don't understand.
I think let's hold on to that for a while because I didn't know how upset I was about it. I think until this morning when it just kept going on, and I thought, hang on, this wasn't just a racist remark. This was a death threat to an entire community to
Exactly.
say, take us, kill us, melt us down, then use whatever remains of us
To feel
in
potholes.
to pure pothole. And what upset me even more was that since that tweet or that tweet has come out, there's been no statement from the prime minister.
Not
There's
just
been no
that.
there's been no
So,
corporate meeting.
so
There are six there are
they,
six Nigerian heritage MPs in the House of Parliament.
and they
None of
haven't
them
taken it up.
have that. The Nigerian embassy has not, and I'm like, what on earth is going on? How is it that we have people who this would affect? Who people will say to you, of course, you will just say no one is going to melt anybody. But I take offense to that because really, if it was any other community that someone said, and pick your choice of
Imagine if I had
community,
said that about Jews.
well, Nick Ferrari will be red in the face, shouting about how this is anti-Semitism. Kemi, what's her name? Badenoch will be talking about how this is bad. Millions of pounds will be released to protect where they are. However, someone goes on Twitter and says there are too many Nigerians. Melt them down, fill potholes with their remains, and everyone is silent. It is not just hurtful, it is heartbreaking that there's a silence from all of the political class, who do not think that the lives of people in not just the Nigerian community but African community, the black, that it really doesn't matter. and they will just look the other way when someone makes a death threat. And before people search it, and before people think, oh, man, you're overthinking it, go back to the radio transmissions that happened before the Rwandan genocide. It was this dehumanizing of people. It was this making people
made it acceptable.
made it acceptable.
I mean, think about the
it's sad.
only person who tried to hold a senior reform member to account about it, ironically, was Laura Kunsberg, whom I don't rate that highly.
Yeah.
But she tried to bring it up to Richard Tice, and Richard Tice basically fobbed it off, and she just let it be. Like haba. It's disgusting. You
okay,
had
sorry.
you had other reform members who. So we're talking of racism now before, because that's the biggest problem with that party. You had a guy, Derek Bullock in Bolton, who used to be a conservative, was disciplined twice by the Conservative Party for racist remark. He called for all Pakistanis to be shot. You had Linda McFarlane, who suggested that Keir Starmer should be shot. She advocated for a white Britain. You had Alan Stay, who consistently, he can't help himself. He can't help himself. He's always using racial slurs. Then you had Brenda Hall, who had as an anti-Afghan racism. See, this thing is in this party's DNA, and that you can already see the lot towards violence. It's part of what they are. These people come into power, violence will not be far behind.
If they come into power, I mean, Kwame Robinson is already their equivalent of the brown shirts. They will unleash him on but Cheta, before we even go far, because I'm still on this Glenn Gibbons character. He's still, even though a day later Reform has suspended him in quotes so that they can investigate, but he's still a councillor. So what we have done, because we know that if we, as you said, we do need to start getting angry about these things. And sadly, our people may not want to get angry, but we've gone ahead to write a letter on our website that you can send to your MP. So if you go to the blackpaper.com/write, you will see that the blackpaper.co.uk/write hyphen to your MP. Anyway, you see the link at the top of our
link is there.
Of our website. It will take you to a page where all you have to do is put your name, put your MP, put your name, put your email address, put your MP's email address, and if you don't know your MP's email address, there's another link under there that can show you who your MP is, and it will open up on your own email client, and just press send. Send that letter to your MP. What we're asking for is, one, that your MP speaks against these death threats against a whole community, and that your MP speaks to the Prime Minister and asks the Prime Minister to stand up and speak against it. Whoever the Prime Minister is by tomorrow, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, but that your MP will ask the Prime Minister to stand up and and categorically state that he, she, they are against death threats to Nigerians and death threats to the community. And what we should also do, Cheta, in the show notes is put the email address of all, I think there are 6 of them, 6 members of parliament who of Nigerian heritage who seriously should take this issue, but who have kept silent, all the way from Kemi.Badenoch to everyone. There are a few of them. There's Kate.osamor, there's florence.eshalomi, there's Folabi, there's Bayo, and I don't think Bim is still there. There's bayo.alaba. There are a lot of MPs, chi.onwurah, who are of Nigerian heritage, who should be incensed.
Should not keep quiet.
Who should not keep quiet when someone says that you should be killed and used to feel poor? It is God. It is Is that how far the Overton window has gone? That someone says this
It is how
and
far the
everyone
Overton window
everyone
has gone.
looks away as if they've just said, "Oh, look, the sun is shining."
So basically, guys, once again, very important letter. Just go to the blackpaper.co.uk and towards the top right-hand corner, you will see write to your MP and click it and the instructions to write the letter to your MP will be there. But we need to make our voices heard on this because this is a direct threat to all of us.
It is, and it's not as if it hasn't happened before because I keep forgetting his name. The young chap whose car was burnt. He was just coming from doing the
Yeah,
Southport
I remember
riots.
that incident. I
Yeah,
remember that
and
incident.
there was a video of some other guy just walking in the park, and then someone sucker punched him for the crime of being black during the South. So as you've said, Cheta, violence is not far from these people, and if reform gets in, God forbid, but if they get in, we might start having to say to people, please walk in groups of two, please walk in groups of three. Do not walk late at night, or if you can, stay overnight in your office and come back in the morning, because this this party has shown that it has no regard for people that from our communities, and they will not just overlook, but they will encourage violence because it suits them.
Exactly.
Rant over.
You ranted long, but I think it was a very necessary um, rant. Anyway, back to the um, the the elections itself.
No.
Um, I think it's important to point out that despite Reform's big wins, they're still in a minority when it comes to overall councillors because not all councillorship seats were up
Mm,
for grabs that day. For example, your own wasn't up for grabs.
yeah.
As an example. Um, Again, I think it's very important, as difficult as it might be, to have calm heads and probably pray, strange coming from me. Um, but this is something that requires calm heads right now, not just in our community, but generally,
Mm,
because what will open the door for a party like Reform to actually get into power is if people lose their heads and are unable to 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 do things clearly.
mm,
Um, Starmer said something in his speech today that him resigning would create turmoil. I see how a lot of people see it as a weak argument.
mm,
It makes him sound like he's saying, "I am the only one who can save Britain," while he's presiding over a collapse. Um, and one of the journalists during the press conference that followed after, one of the journalists actually asked him, said, in 2021, when Labour lost heavily in the councillorship elections of that year, you contemplated resigning. What is so different now that you've lost even bigger? Why
mm,
don't you want to resign? And then he waffled a bit about how the Tories kept changing. The ironic thing is he's right.
mm,
He's not in a position to enforce that. It's just that simple.
mm,
This is an argument that he could have made 2 years ago if he had taken more principled stance. And I think there's a lesson to be learned here about principles. This is a man who came into power promising that he would be different. He failed on that promise, and we're saying we're basically all of us are basically reaping the whirlwind of that.
yeah. And the other thing, Chita, is you spoke about calm heads. Now, before the elections, I remember because as you can imagine, I'm in a lot of WhatsApp groups, um, and the
And you
people
added me
were
to yet another one.
it's yet another one. But there were a lot of people were up and and really hot about the idea of just voting other parties to just really punish neighbor. And I kept trying to make the argument that yes, I know everyone is angry, but we do need to have calm heads because here's what's going to happen. And of course, you even called me out on that, saying that yeah, we're using fear. However,
I
after
called you out on that, but I
Mm.
did say
no, but
that for us it would be
yeah, fair enough.
um it
But
would be
but, but
it would be in our
it should be
interests
in our interest, yeah.
because
But
this
what
outcome
happened?
with the coup
Mm.
was entirely foreseeable.
Yeah. What happened was that the day after the so it was almost hard trying to convince people, and you could hear the cynicism. Of course, Ndukwe would say vote Labour. He's a Labour councillor, but immediately the results started coming in. It was almost as if the a bucket of ice water was poured on everyone because you could hear the just the shock. And people were like, it was almost like, oh my goodness, this actually happened. And
So
it suddenly starts dawning on people that we're in dangerous waters right now.
Mm, people tend to be emotional. Politics is a lot of politics is about emotions,
Politics
and
is
people tend to
emotional.
be emotional in this kind of stuff. So, take as an example, many of the people who voted
Mm,
reform not because they are racist, but because they are angry. It's the
true.
same reason many of the people who voted for Brexit in 10 years ago now voted for Brexit not because they were not because they were not for nefarious reasons, but because they were angry. That's
Mm,
what an economic crisis does to people. Unfortunately, it puts people in a position where they make this kind of mistaken votes and then begin to bite their tongue later on, like, hey, what have we done? What have we
mm,
done? And then it becomes a vicious cycle, as the British are seeing now,
mm,
because in order to try um to right the wrong, for want of a better expression, and I'm not saying that's what it is, but it's the closest I can think of immediately. In order to try to right the wrong, people have a tendency to dig the hole deeper.
mm. Anyway, I think this this episode has more or less been one of ranting, and I, perhaps I
Now
think
you the rant too.
yeah, I know. I think I needed this more than
Like I
anything.
said,
But
you needed the catharsis.
but Cheta, before we go, it's if this was May 13th, which is 2 days, we would have been celebrating our 1 year anniversary on the Black Paper. But since we're recording before the anniversary to date. I just want to say happy anniversary. It's been an amazing, and it's almost like just 2 months ago that we started, but it's actually 1 year since we started the Black Paper. And what has been your best bit so far?
I don't keep track of that kind of thing.
But I'm sure there has to be one episode that you looked at like, you know what, this was quite interesting.
I mean, the episodes where we talked about geopolitics,
Mm,
which is what I really enjoyed doing. So we've had at least 3 episodes that were pure geopolitical talk, and
mm.
I enjoyed recording those. So
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, it will be interestingly the survey. You know how excited I was about the survey, but
I mean, I was one who did the data crunching and all of that. So
uh,
yeah, I enjoyed. It's what I do for a living, so I enjoy it. I actually enjoy
uh-huh,
looking at data and
mm,
basically crunching it.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I liked that. I like
yeah,
that.
and we do want to keep these podcast going, and at the moment we're looking at crowdfunding just so that we can get a lot more in terms of professionalizing our recording,
Yeah,
increasing our research, and just making sure that we're able to continue producing the sort of content that our community really does benefit from. So what we will do is in the coming episodes we'll just set out our stall in terms of how you can create, how you can contribute towards the Black Paper and keep us going, help us get a lot more listeners coming and getting our voices out there. But until then, we just, I'm sure, Cheta, would like to say a huge thank you to everyone from Nigeria to Ghana to Australia to South Korea, of course, the US, the UK, and a lot of interesting places who have been listening to us, and who have kept us going.
And,
Thank you very
and
much.
those who have been giving us feedback. And I want to specially call out Otuke. He's in Hall, and he really freaked out when Reform swept Hall in the last elections. Hang in tight, my brother.
Yeah.
Then he go better.
And then there was someone that sent you a message when I think the first set of election results started coming and said Ndukwe will not like this.
Yeah. The person requested not to be named.
Yeah. Little did they know that he was worse than. Yeah.
But if on a more serious note, the results were not as bad as some polls actually
Yes.
predicted.
Yes. Yes.
So it's again which ties into what I've been saying. Reform has peaked.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, my fear is, will the Labour Party hold?
Well, let us see. Let us see. It's only how many? Let's check. Okay, the tracker says there are still 76 people, so that's good. Although it's 4 more until there's a threshold uh,
For a leadership contest.
for a leadership contest, but sadly, I don't see this thing holding at 76. So let's see.
It won't hold at 76.
Mm,
The real question is whether he will survive a leadership contest. If
mm.
he survives a leadership contest, um, he will come out of it diminished, and then there will be calls for a general election, and he may give in to the temptation to.
Whoa, Cheta, this was
Yes.
39 minutes ago. So while we were recording, Politics UK says breaking. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood and 2 other senior cabinet ministers have told Starmer to set out a resignation timeline.
Mm, mm,
That is serious.
yeah. Well,
Oh, well.
it's the night of the long knives.
It is. It is. In fact, I don't think the knives are even so long. Maybe short up close knives, so that you can
Nah,
feel it as you're looking into your eyes.
nah. The short knife will be if David Lamb is one of them.
or Ed Miliband.
Nah. Ed Miliband
Well, Ed
was
Miliband
always
is on the left. Yeah,
Ed
well,
Miliband was never really a Starmer guy.
Steve Reed. If Steve Reed is one of them.
David
Yeah.
Lammy. Anyway,
All right, Cheta.
let's watch. All right then.
Yeah, I'll see you at the next one. I'm sure at some point we'll probably do an emergency pod, but if we don't, see you at the next one.